So he starts off by, I guess, sort of saying, is it in a way, it's a bit like, you may not have expected this video from me, and
Yes, yeah.
talking about James and the diagnosis, and then coming back to sort of, then the next section I'd say was kind of around how they manage and what James's life is like, and the next section was then about why he started this foundation.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm sort of sorry because of my reminiscing, I've sort of started at the end because that's where I finished. And by that point, I wanted to scream into the computer, this already happens. There are amazing charities all over who do this
Yes.
all the time. And they have the blueprint for doing this. This is how I was brought up, watching this kind of support.
Mm.
But we just need to make it so that it's not exceptional to have it. You don't need to have lots of money to go to Disneyland to have it, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, so bringing it back to the beginning, so he's in his house and they show you like videos of, he's sort of doing a piece to camera, isn't he, in his house,
Yeah.
and also videos of him with James in the garden. And one
Yes.
of the things I love best is, if anyone has ever spent a lot of time or lived with someone with a condition like Angelman syndrome, or I was talking about MPS3, which is Sanfilippo syndrome earlier, the noises from the background just sent me straight back to my childhood of like this grown adult who's like laughing and communicating in the background. And I like that they clearly had James just doing his thing in the house while Colin was being interviewed.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that for me really came across was just, his pride and love for James. And he talks about, the fact that, so just to put it into perspective, Angelman syndrome is a genetic condition. It affects the nervous system. It can cause things like developmental delays in speech and movement. So children may have problems with balance or moving. And one of the things that Colin talks so proudly about is when his son learnt to walk when he was 4, and how it
Mm.
was such a huge moment. And he was talking a lot about how things like that, which might seem, quite normal and quite commonplace to other parents, but for him, for James, that was so, he knows how hard James has worked to get to that place, and his
Mm.
respect for him. And he's always saying he's just such a happy, joyful boy, and I'm so fortunate to have him in my life. And I gather that it's one of the traits of children that have Angelman syndrome is that they smile and they laugh a lot and they're excited. And he sort of really opens up about that and how wonderful that actually is. I think it's really nice because sometimes you can hear about the difficulties, and of course it's not going to be easy as a parent with a child with quite extreme disabilities. But, the fact that he talks so much about the joy that James brings to his life and how he is different and how wonderful he is, I thought was really, really lovely. And it spoke to me that he, you see him as an actor on TV, you think, oh, well, he's very wealthy and, he's got this lifestyle. But actually, it really made him seem like a human, which I thought was lovely.
Yeah, he felt like all the dads I've ever known
Yes.
through MPS. It just felt like, again, it's that feeling of all of the other stuff melts away because it's
Yes.
actually not that important, the other stuff. And I think that really comes through in the interview because he talks about how he stopped drinking when James was age 2, because he said he realized it just wasn't physically possible for him to be an important, a supportive part of James's life and have a drinking addiction. And then, then I think he said something like, when you live with a child with special needs, everything is magnetized.
Yeah.
And again, I really relate to that from my experiences growing up, of the lows are low, the grief is awful, and the things that you know can happen when you're in this community that most people live in complete ignorance about. That is not to be underestimated. But the highs are high, like the joy is intense. And I can get quite prickly about this when people who haven't got lived experience say things like that a condition is devastating or a diagnosis is devastating. Because, yes, as a parent, never hearing your child speak, because I don't think he talks about speech, but never hearing your child speak or not knowing if they'll ever walk, that must be incredibly hard. But you can't call James's life devastating, just like you couldn't call other people's lives devastating with other conditions. If we don't look after people and if we don't support families, the consequences can be devastating. But we
Yes.
can't just broad strokes say, I don't know whether often this kind of language is used to talk about screening or something. Choice and support is incredibly important, but we can't just paint conditions as one thing, living with a condition as one thing. And
Yes.
I think he makes it really human and real in this video.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really agree. And one of the things that he really brings across is, like you said about the support for parents, because, being everything being magnified. And
I think he said magnetized, but then I am dyslexic, so I could have written it down
I'm
as
assuming it's
magnified.
maybe it was magnetized. Who knows?
I think you're right. I think it's magnified. I'm gonna go
But
back and see.
no, well, yes, we'll see. We'll see. I can listen again. But yeah, I think one of the things in terms of, he said that its parents can feel that they can't have time off or they'll feel guilty, having a weekend out. And one of the things he talked about in his long-term view for the foundation is having this camp, which sounds like a camp that you've been to. And I think this is actually something that he hasn't actually set up yet, but he's got plans for it. I think in 2016, I had a quick look on the website, and it was based around another celebrities camp, which I believe was Paul Newman.
Oh yeah, Paul Newman. He's such
Yeah, so he did like
he
hole in
does
the wall
Source
gang
as
camp.
well. Source and amazing things, and an
Yeah,
actor. Was an
yeah,
actor.
well, exactly. So yeah, so and it was for this, and he said that like the children, like you said about the children having these wonderful experiences, but also that the parents could go off, and he said he wanted to have like a tent where they could have a massage, not feel guilty about it because he knows that that the children are having, your children are having a great time and they're fully cared for. And yeah, and I think it just that, because obviously it's something that unless you've been there, you wouldn't fully understand that guilt and the sort of, the mental strain of wanting to be there all the time, but also needing a bit of time for yourself. And, we all know that, to be the best parent, you do need to have those moments, to have that time out so that you can refresh and be present and enjoy those magical moments. So I think it was really enlightening for me to hear that come across, because he said that he can afford the full-time carers and things, but who can afford full-time carers? That's so unusual, isn't it? To be in that privileged position to be able to afford that. So actually the fact that he's thinking outside the box and thinking of other people and how they can cope when they don't have such a privileged financial situation, I thought was really interesting and really insightful.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know much about Colin Farrell's background, but being an Irish, he's Irish, and I don't know whether he comes from like a line of other actors, but I wonder maybe I need to do some looking up on whether he seems to understand his privilege
Yeah.
and not like reject it. He's like, yeah, I'm going to use it. But he also knows what's interesting is the timing of this video. The reason he is doing this now is because he's living in fear,
Yes. And that comes across,
because
doesn't
it does. He's
it?
like, he's basically, anyone who has to provide a certain amount of care for someone is always going to worry. I mean, Joe's just dropped her daughter off, Maisie, at university, right? And she's going to worry that,
Yes.
without herself there, how's Maisie going to be? But let alone when Colin knows that him and James's mum are likely to pass away before James does. And therefore, at some point in his life, James is not going to have these people who are orchestrating, looking after, and also providing just that love and that really safe space.